At the heart of Stoicism, the idea that difficulties are essential for the development of virtue is not limited to an abstract concept or a philosophical ideal detached from reality. It is a daily, concrete, and intentional practice applied to the way individuals approach life itself. For Stoic philosophers such as Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius, living virtuously does not mean seeking comfort, security, or continuous pleasure, but rather assuming responsibility for acting correctly even when doing so requires effort, sacrifice, and confrontation. In this sense, Stoicism proposes a reversal of common logic. What is normally avoided, discomfort, difficulty, resistance, comes to be valued as an instrument of growth. The Stoics understood that an excessively comfortable life weakens character because it offers no real opportunities to exercise courage, discipline, justice, and wisdom. Without challenges, virtue remains theoretical rather than lived. It is only in the face of adversity that individuals are forced to confront their weaknesses and consciously choose who they want to become. For these philosophers, adversity is neither a mistake of life nor a punishment imposed by fate. It is a natural part of existence and, more importantly, the environment in which character is formed. Every obstacle reveals something about us, our fears, impulses, beliefs, and our ability to act rationally. When faced with awareness and intention, external difficulties are transformed into internal progress. Epictetus taught that it is not events themselves that disturb people, but the judgments they make about them. This idea reinforces the notion that adversity does not determine the value of an experience. What truly matters is the posture adopted in response to it. Seneca viewed difficulties as trials meant to strengthen the soul, comparing them to exercises that train moral endurance. Marcus Aurelius, in turn, constantly reminded himself that every challenge was an opportunity to practice virtue in that very moment. Thus, seeking situations that challenge our limitations is not an act of self-sabotage, but of self-mastery. By placing themselves in front of difficulty, individuals are compelled to act with greater awareness, discipline, and responsibility. Virtue ceases to be a distant ideal and becomes a living practice built daily through difficult choices. It is through this process that character is refined, the mind is strengthened, and life gains depth and meaning. Stoicism holds that virtue cannot flourish without the presence of difficulty because resistance is precisely what reveals the quality of character. For the Stoics, virtue is not moral rhetoric or abstract intention, but the concrete ability to act according to reason and higher values regardless of external circumstances. A comfortable, predictable life may appear desirable, but from a Stoic perspective, it offers little room for genuine moral development. In an easy environment, where everything unfolds smoothly and favorably, our choices are rarely tested. Acting correctly when there is no cost, risk, or discomfort requires little moral strength. In such contexts, anyone may appear balanced, just, or disciplined. Yet this appearance of virtue is fragile because it has not been tested under pressure. For the Stoics, virtue becomes authentic only when it remains firm in the face of adversity. It is in moments of difficulty that individuals are confronted with their true priorities and values. When obstacles, losses, injustices, or uncertainty arise, we are forced to choose between acting rationally or surrendering to fear, anger, impulsiveness, or despair. These situations demand difficult decisions in which the easiest path almost always conflicts with the right one. It is at this point that character is truly revealed. For the Stoic, every obstacle functions as a moral trial. It challenges not only emotional endurance, but also clarity of judgment and firmness of principles. Courage emerges when there is something to fear, discipline when there is temptation to give up, justice when there is advantage in acting unjustly, and wisdom when choices are unclear. Without difficulty, these virtues remain latent without practical expression. Thus, Stoicism teaches that challenges are not unwanted interruptions of life, but essential elements of human development. They provide the necessary context for virtue to be exercised, strengthened, and confirmed. Facing difficulty is not merely enduring what is unpleasant, but seizing the opportunity to act according to reason even when it requires effort. It is in this confrontation with hardship that virtue ceases to be an ideal and becomes a living reality within character. In moments of difficulty, Stoic virtues cease to be abstract concepts and become practical guiding principles. Courage, discipline, wisdom, and justice become essential precisely because adversity removes comfort and forces conscious action. When conditions are favorable, these virtues remain in the background. Difficulty calls them into action and reveals whether they have truly been cultivated. Courage, for instance, has no function in situations of comfort, stability, and safety. It exists only where there is fear, risk, or the threat of loss. Being courageous does not mean the absence of fear, but the rational decision to act rightly despite it. For the Stoic, facing discomfort, uncertainty, or pain without abandoning responsibility is the clearest expression of courage. Without adversity, courage can only be imagined, not practiced. Discipline manifests itself when the easier path presents itself as constant temptation. When everything flows effortlessly, there is no need for inner control. But when fatigue, frustration, or the desire for immediate pleasure arises, discipline becomes indispensable. It allows individuals to continue acting in alignment with their principles, even when motivation weakens. It is in this tension between duty and comfort that discipline is forged. Wisdom appears when choices are neither simple nor obvious. Moral dilemmas, decisions under pressure, and ambiguous situations demand reflection, clarity, and balanced judgment. Stoic wisdom does not rely on impulsive or uncontrolled emotions, but on the capacity to analyze circumstances, understand what is within one's control, and act coherently with reason. Without difficulty, this virtue remains untested. Finally, justice becomes most meaningful when acting rightly carries personal cost. Being just when it brings advantage is easy. The true test occurs when justice requires sacrifice, self-restraint, or confrontation. Difficulty reveals whether individuals are willing to uphold their values, even when it is inconvenient. Thus, difficult moments not only demand these virtues, but constitute the only context in which they can be fully developed and solidified. Without adversity, virtue remains confined to intention or moral discourse, without the chance to manifest concretely. Difficulty forces individuals out of theory and into action, revealing the strength or fragility of their principles. Adversity acts as a formative force in shaping character. When facing situations involving resistance, pressure, or loss, individuals are compelled to exercise self-control, discernment, and moral firmness. Each choice made under such conditions reinforces internal habits and reshapes the structure of the mind. Over time, acting according to reason ceases to be an exceptional effort and becomes a stable disposition of character. Through this process, virtue becomes consistent action rather than something dependent on favorable circumstances. Individuals learn to maintain clarity and integrity even in hostile or uncertain environments. Courage becomes natural in the presence of fear, discipline persists despite discomfort, and wisdom guides decisions under pressure. Life is no longer governed by emotional reactions, but by conscious choice. In this way, living according to reason, the central aim of Stoicism, becomes possible precisely because the individual has been trained by adversity. External circumstances lose their power to destabilize because strength is anchored internally. Difficulty, far from obstructing a good life, reveals itself as the essential element in forming a firm, coherent, and genuinely virtuous character. These challenging moments, therefore, should not be seen merely as temporary obstacles to overcome, but as deliberate opportunities to exercise and strengthen virtue. From a Stoic perspective, each difficulty carries within it the possibility of moral growth, because it forces individuals out of automatic behavior and into conscious action aligned with reason and values. A person's true character is not revealed in comfortable situations where acting rightly costs nothing. It is revealed under pressure when there is something to lose, or when the easiest path conflicts with what is right. At that point, principles cease to be abstract ideas and begin to guide concrete action. Acting according to them, despite effort, discomfort, or sacrifice, is what distinguishes genuine virtue from mere moral intention. For the Stoic, enduring discomfort is not an end in itself, but a natural consequence of choosing reason over impulse. When individuals accept this cost without resentment, they strengthen their integrity and build internal coherence. Each decision made under such conditions consolidates firmer mental habits, making virtue less dependent on circumstance and more deeply rooted in character. Thus, difficult moments cease to be seen as unwelcome interruptions of life and are recognized as an essential part of personal formation. They provide the necessary setting for virtue to be practiced, confirmed, and refined. By acting rightly even when it is difficult, individuals not only overcome the immediate situation, but also become stronger, more stable, and more faithful to their principles. If a person consistently avoids challenges, seeking only easy and comfortable situations, their virtue remains superficial. Without the tests imposed by difficulty, there is no opportunity to practice true courage, discipline, or wisdom. In such cases, virtue is not cultivated, but neglected. An example can be found in education. If someone never challenges themselves intellectually, never seeks to learn complex material or demand more of themselves, they lose the chance to cultivate wisdom. Superficial knowledge is never sufficient to develop genuine understanding. Likewise, those who avoid physical, emotional, or social challenges miss the opportunity to become stronger, more resilient, and more balanced. The true test of character occurs when we face difficult situations and still choose to act according to our principles, when we have the option to quit but choose to persist, or when we face criticism and resistance, yet choose fairness and sound judgment. We are practicing virtue authentically. Stoicism teaches us to actively seek difficulties, not as something to fear or avoid, but as something to embrace. Suffering and challenges are not viewed as punishments from fate, but as fertile ground for inner growth. They teach us to manage our emotions, control our desires, and make decisions with clarity and determination. Each difficulty represents a concrete opportunity for self-knowledge and inner improvement. By facing challenging situations, individuals gain clearer insight into their reactions, limits, fears, and behavioral patterns. This process reveals not only weaknesses, but also capacities that often remain hidden in comfortable contexts. Adversity exposes who we truly are and, at the same time, who we are capable of becoming. Beyond self-knowledge, difficulties directly stimulate the development of inner capacities. Qualities such as resilience, self-control, patience, and emotional clarity do not arise spontaneously. They are built through continuous confrontation with situations that require effort and adaptation. Each challenge overcome strengthens confidence in one's ability to deal with life, reducing dependence on favorable external conditions. The analogy with the physical body illustrates this process well. A muscle grows only when subjected to loads that exceed its comfort zone, creating tension and requiring adaptation. In the same way, the mind and character develop when exposed to pressure, frustration, and uncertainty. Without such stimulus, they remain fragile and ill-prepared for more severe adversity. From a Stoic standpoint, this strengthening does not occur by chance, but as the result of a conscious posture toward difficulty. Rather than resisting or lamenting, individuals learn to use each challenge as an exercise in inner growth. In this way, difficulties cease to be merely negative episodes and become essential components in building a stronger, more balanced mind, capable of acting according to reason under any circumstance. This means that, from a Stoic perspective, systematically avoiding what is difficult is equivalent to renouncing personal development. Instead of seeking only the most comfortable path, individuals are encouraged to actively pursue experiences that demand effort, responsibility, and confrontation. Not out of attachment to suffering, but because these situations create the necessary conditions for genuine growth of character and mind. By doing difficult things consciously, individuals cease to be driven by circumstances and begin to govern themselves. Each challenge faced expands tolerance for frustration, strengthens inner discipline, and deepens clarity about what truly matters. The obstacle, in this sense, is not merely something to be removed, but an instrument of personal transformation. These experiences also function as a mirror. It is in difficult moments that our true capacities emerge, because we cannot rely on external ease or ideal conditions. Effort reveals the depth of our courage, the consistency of our discipline, and the solidity of our values. What once appeared to be a limit often proves to be nothing more than initial resistance. Over time, individuals approach a higher version of themselves, not in the sense of perfection, but of internal coherence and moral strength. Virtue ceases to be a distant ideal and begins to guide concrete action, even under pressure. It is precisely in difficult moments that we discover how far we are capable of going and how committed we truly are to living according to reason and principle. Stoicism therefore teaches that difficulties should not be feared or rejected, but accepted with clarity and, in many cases, consciously sought. They are not unwanted detours from the path, but the very ground upon which virtue can be exercised, strengthened, and refined. Without confrontation with life's resistance, virtue remains incomplete, lacking the opportunity for full expression. Difficulties function as a moral arena. It is there that courage is tested, discipline is consolidated, wisdom is applied, and justice is put on trial. Each adverse situation demands a response, and it is within that response that character is revealed. When we choose to face challenges directly rather than flee or resent them, we take responsibility for our reactions and reaffirm the rule of reason over impulse. Doing what is difficult from this perspective is not an occasional act of heroism, but a continuous practice of self-development. With each difficult choice, individuals move closer to inner excellence, understood by the Stoics not as external perfection, but as coherence between thought, values, and action. This process also leads to self-knowledge, revealing limits, weaknesses, and potential that only become visible under pressure. For the Stoic, a virtuous life is not one free of obstacles, but one that integrates difficulties as an essential part of moral and intellectual growth. Adversity ceases to be an enemy to be fought and becomes a demanding but necessary teacher. Through it, individuals learn to live with greater awareness, firmness, and alignment with reason, building a life that is truly full and meaningful. Doing difficult things is, in fact, the most direct way to strengthen the mind, character, and connection to true virtue. As the Stoics teach, genuine peace of mind and happiness do not come from the absence of challenges, but from our ability to face them with courage, wisdom, and discipline. One of the central foundations of Stoicism is the clear distinction between what is within our control and what is not. Epictetus begins the Enchiridion by stating that our opinions, judgments, desires, aversions, and voluntary actions belong to us, while the body, reputation, comfort, ease, and external events are subject to chance and circumstance. Understanding this division is not merely an intellectual exercise, but a practical guideline for living well. Doing difficult things is one of the most direct ways to put this principle into practice. By deliberately choosing the difficult path, individuals reaffirm their self-mastery. They demonstrate that their actions are not guided by impulse, the immediate pursuit of pleasure, or the automatic avoidance of discomfort. Instead, they act according to reason. For the Stoic, true freedom does not consist in doing whatever one desires, but in not being dominated by desire. Voluntary effort thus becomes an act of inner liberation. This stance requires a profound shift in perspective regarding pain and discomfort. The Stoic does not view suffering as an evil in itself, but as something neutral whose value depends on the judgment we assign to it. The true evil, according to this philosophy, is not feeling pain, fatigue, or frustration, but acting irrationally, cowardly, or unjustly out of fear of these sensations. Constantly fleeing discomfort weakens the mind. Facing it with clarity strengthens character. By consciously exposing themselves to difficulty, whether through hard work, personal discipline, renunciation of excess pleasure, or calm acceptance of adverse situations, individuals train their will. This training builds solid emotional autonomy. Rather than reacting automatically to external stimuli, people begin to respond deliberately, aligned with their values. Over time, this practice drastically reduces emotional vulnerability. Those accustomed to facing difficulty voluntarily are less easily destabilized by loss, frustration, or unexpected change. What drives others to despair becomes, for the trained Stoic, simply another circumstance to be faced with balance. Discomfort, once feared, comes to be understood as a natural part of life and an effective means of inner strengthening. In this way, Stoicism teaches that doing difficult things is not an exercise in pointless suffering, but a conscious method of self-governance. By accepting and even seeking necessary effort, individuals build a firm mind, independent of the fluctuations of the external world. Discomfort ceases to be an enemy to avoid and becomes an ally in the process of growth, maturity, and inner freedom. The ultimate goal of Stoicism was never to eliminate life's problems, because the Stoics understood this to be impossible. Reality is inherently unstable, unpredictable, and often adverse. The true purpose of this philosophy is to form a solid character, capable of remaining firm, lucid, and whole under any circumstance. Doing difficult things consciously, repeatedly, and voluntarily is the means by which this inner stability is built. For the Stoic, tranquility does not arise from the absence of difficulty, but from the ability to face it without losing inner balance. A mind that functions well only under favorable conditions is fragile. A mind trained through effort, discipline, and constant exposure to difficulty becomes resilient to life's fluctuations. Each challenge faced acts as an exercise that strengthens this internal structure, making individuals less reactive and more self-aware. Marcus Aurelius expressed this principle clearly when he stated that what stands in the way of action can become part of the action itself. This idea, often summarized as "the obstacle is the way," reflects a deeply practical Stoic view. The problem is not an external force blocking progress, it is the very element that makes progress possible: Without resistance, there is no growth. Without difficulty, there is no refinement of character. From this perspective, every challenge ceases to be a negative event and becomes raw material for inner development. Frustration teaches patience, loss teaches detachment, criticism teaches humility, and obstacles teach perseverance. Those who adopt this posture no longer depend on ideal circumstances to act well. They learn to do what is right, even when the context is unfavorable. Over time, this constant choice of difficulty produces profound and lasting effects. A tranquility emerges that does not rely on external control, a self-confidence rooted in the ability to face life, and a moral clarity that guides decisions even in the most complex moments. Individuals come to trust not that everything will turn out well, but that they will be capable of handling any outcome. The Stoic, therefore, does not seek a comfortable or problem-free life. He seeks a strong, disciplined mind, aligned with reason. Doing difficult things ceases to be viewed as sacrifice and becomes recognized as an investment in character. It is a rational, conscious, and deeply practical choice for living a full, stable, and virtuous life, regardless of external circumstances.